Just very briefly, I'm coming from something called the WWF Baltic Ecoregion program. WWF, as many of you may know, is a global conservation organization active in over 100 countries around the globe. But of course, even amid this global reach, the Baltic Sea remains one of our priority areas of focus. And we've been active in this region for decades through this Ecoregion program, which is comprised of partners in each of the Baltic Sea coastal countries, either WWF offices or long-term NGO partners. And as Ottilia said, given the focus of our work, which is on the sustainable management and use of the Baltic Sea's resources, we of course are very interested in ensuring the success of the strategies and the goals it has outlined. And as Ottilia said, we've had a lot of consensus today regarding that the sea is getting crowded. We have to do a lot to ensure that we coordinate the use of our shared sea in order to ensure sustainable development in the region. And when we talk about the future, it is of course very important that we ground our discussion in today's reality, that the Baltic Sea is in fact one of the most heavily used seas on the planet already today. So when we talk about future growth, blue, green, or otherwise, we have to make sure that we do so understanding that we have to pursue this growth, given an understanding of the ecological boundaries faced by the Baltic Sea. And given this growth that is expected across the region, let's talk about future trends before we talk about scenarios. In 2010, WWF launched a report which looked at the future growth of different sectors expected in the region over the next 10 and 20 years. This report showed that human activities in the region will expand substantially, in some sectors more than several 100%. And if we map out all sectors' use of the Baltic Sea in 2010, it looks like this. In 2020, it will increase. And in 2030, it looks like this. Looking at these maps, it's obvious that there is tremendous pressure on the Baltic Sea already today, and that this pressure and the competition for space and resources will only continue to increase in the future, between different sectors, as well as between human uses and nature. Which means that it is all the more critical that we move away from the present system, which has happened over time, where we plan for the future use of marine space and resources sector by sector, country by country, ministry by ministry, with little or no consideration for the cumulative impacts of these multiple uses on the ecosystem capacity of the Baltic Sea. And obviously, operating in this way has faced us with many of the challenges we are still dealing with. So, we have a challenge before us. The situation makes the achievement of the EU strategy's objective to save the sea all the more challenging, particularly because this objective is critical in order to realize the other objectives to connect the region and increase prosperity. And as we heard this morning, there are a number of agreements and conventions designed to manage and protect the Baltic Sea. The question is, are these agreements and conventions delivering what they need to be? WWF has demonstrated through a number of what we've called scorecard reports that there is unfortunately a growing gap between the statements and commitments made by governments and the necessary actions needed to deliver upon their commitments. Our latest report, delivered in June, evaluated the status of the implementation of the Halkaan Baltic Sea Action Plan, a plan which many of you, of course, know was signed and agreed by governments around the region in 2007 to restore the good ecological status of the Baltic Sea by 2021. This report demonstrated a worrying lack of progress in implementing many of the key actions needed to deliver the BSAP. A concern, as we heard today, was echoed by many ministers at the ministerial meeting which took place in Copenhagen last month. And while this lack of progress was noted, unfortunately, there were few details about how exactly this progress will be addressed. This same ministerial meeting, as many of us know, faced a dramatic impasse on some key decisions, which for us demonstrated once again very clearly the challenge of our fragmented political decision-making when it comes to the environmental governance of the Baltic Sea. Why aren't we progressing as fast as we need to in terms of saving the sea? We believe the situation is due in part to the fact that when it comes to the Baltic Sea environment, the governance is too narrowly focused, considered to be the sole domain of environmental ministries, yet the challenges that these ministries must address fall under the domain of other ministries who often undermine or counteract their decisions. Without the commitment from across all ministries, agriculture, finance, enterprise, fisheries, as well as top political support from prime ministers, meaningful solutions are difficult, if not nearly impossible, to achieve. This is again why the strategy is so critical, and much of what we have heard already this morning, so that we can make sure that we don't end up like the gentlemen in this boat, each trying to go a different direction and thus not making the progress they need to. Another challenge, of course, that we face is that ambitious measures to protect the Baltic Sea are often perceived as costs rather than important investments in the Baltic Sea future. This is something we will hear more about from our colleagues from the Boston Consulting Group. It's exactly for this reason of the need to have a shared dialogue about the complex decision-making that is needed to ensure the support for the future of the Baltic Sea that WWF launched Work With Scenarios to, again, facilitate an understanding of what kind of commitments and future we would like to have in the region. The result was this report, Countercurrents for the Baltic Sea, which explored a number of future possibilities told through 4 storylines entitled Clear Waters Ahead, Dangerous Currents, Islands in the Stream, and Shipwrecked. Importantly, the scenarios were based on 2 critical variables. The first being governance, and whether in 2030 we would have a more integrated or a more fragmented governance of the Baltic Sea region. The second key indicator was ecological footprint, which is an indicator that measures our human impact in nature, and thus whether by 2030 our ecological footprint will either increase or decrease. Given these variables, the exploration of the potential of regional integration via mechanisms such as the EU strategy were explored. You will shortly hear more from the Boston Consulting Group about 2 of these scenarios in particular. Clear Waters Ahead, which you could say is the most optimistic or positive version of the future of the Baltic Sea in 2030, celebrated by integrated governance, a low footprint, thriving regional economies, and a healthy Baltic Sea. And Shipwrecked, which we could say is the least positive scenario, characterized by high fragmentation, high footprints, continuing degradation of the Baltic Sea, which is undermining the future potential for growth. Interestingly enough, when we presented the scenarios last year, and we've been working with them over the past year, a continued question came up, which was, of course, one of the consistent questions that we need to also answer today. What are the economic and environmental benefits of securing a healthy Baltic Sea, and what are the cost or implications of failing to do so? Fortunately, as a result of a strategic partnership between WWF and the Boston Consulting Group, BCG has prepared a compelling analysis which answers this exact question. The Boston Consulting Group, as many of you know, is of course a global management consultancy and one of the world's leading advisors on business strategy. Thus, we've been delighted to have the opportunity to work with them, who have kindly provided pro bono support to WWF, resulting in the report they will present today. We hope you'll find their perspective and analysis as compelling as we do, as we believe it provides an important context for today's discussions. Thank you.